shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
After listening to We Shall Overcome, you can see that the lyrics of the song does not describe a particular event. The content of the song is generally broad that can be used in many protest movements. The song delivers hope and faith to people and belief of a brighter future to whoever listens to it. The song also meant to hold people together and fight for the equality and freedom that they deserve. The literary techniques that the lyrics use are parallelism, repetition, and rhyme, so the overall structure and the literary techniques makes the song easy to remember, which is an especially important factor of being a successful protest song. The exact origin and the real composer and lyrics writer are very hard to attract right now. The most popular explanation of the text is rooted in African American church. The melody came from I Will Overcome Someday, which is composed by Reverend Charles Tintley of Philadelphia. The origin of the song came from Black Slaves Labor Song, which is gospel music, which they used to sustain themselves until Charles Tintley adopted and published the song I Will Overcome Someday. The opening and closing melody are from No More Auction Blocks for Me, which is a spiritual song that can be traced before the Civil War. Also, the song is derived from African American folk song, using pentatonic intervals with ample space allowed for improvised interpolation. The addition of blue thirds and sevenths and frequently features short refrains in which the congregation could join. The song has a rich historic background and audience behind it. In 1945, black members of the Food, Tobacco, and Agriculture Worker Union used the song to sing on their picket lines. After the song was introduced to Highlander Folk School, and Peter Singer made a few changes to the tune and We Will Overcome to We Shall Overcome. We Shall Overcome are also used during protest marches, on the Freedom Ride buses, and in jail cell, which makes the song more well known to the public. The new words and music arrangements are done by Zelphia Horton, Frank Hamilton, Guy Carawan, and Pete Seeger. Zelphia Horton, who is a social justice activist and musician, and she is Carawan's predecessor as music director of Highlander Center. She taught it to Pete Seeger, and Pete changed will to shall. Guy Carawan makes a great contribution of letting We Shall Overcome become the anthem of civil rights movement due to his performance at the inaugural meeting of Students' Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in Raleigh, North Carolina in April 1960s. The person who made this song really becomes popular is Joan Baez. She performed We Shall Overcome on 1963 March on Washington, which she led a crowd over 300,000 to sing the song. So the reason for this song is still popular is because it involved in many major historical events in the civil rights movement. Furthermore, the amount of audience is also the reason why it can last so long. The period that this song refers to is the Civil Rights Movement, which is from the 1950s to 1960s. Civil rights movement is a mass social movement that African Americans fight for the equal treatment of fundamental rights and privilege as U.S. citizens. The civil rights movement earned impressive judicial and legislative victories in voting rights, job opportunities, housing, and public discrimination. Civil rights movement brings greater equality, and it is a critical step and essential success for the struggle of African American and other minority groups to earn their equal rights and fair treatment. The oppressed groups are African Americans and other minorities, which they suffer include racial segregation, unequal voting rights, unfair job opportunities, and lynching. Racial segregation includes live in completely separate areas, separate education for black and whites, separate public areas. The areas, separate education for black and whites, separate public areas. The privileged group are white Americans, which they had beyond those tangible benefits. Some white Americans think that they are inherently superior to other race. Some white Southerners have a strong stereotype about African Americans. They think that black are unclean, unintelligent, oversexed. They need to be submissive. They don't have the right to be free if they are not white. One of the most famous events in civil rights movement is March on Washington in 1963.
August 28, 1963. 250,000 Americans, black and white, young and old, descend on the nation's capital in a show of solidarity. It was called the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, but it will be remembered as a turning point in the fight for civil rights. Among the speakers, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who electrified the crowd with his stirring "I Have a Dream" speech.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream.
The march directly promoted the enactment of Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968. Even though the march does not contribute directly to other legislation beside the three that I mentioned above, it provides momentum for immigration reform, the war on poverty, and Medicare and Medicaid. As John Baez once said, music is probably the only medium that really does cross all boundaries and all language and all countries. Protest music encourages people in all nations, just like We Shall Overcome. It's not only used in various movements in the U.S. history, but is still popular today. It is widespread all over the world. We Shall Overcome delivers hope and encouragement to people and tell them we can overcome any obstacles no matter what we face now and in the future. Music and social protest solidify the chain of commitment among followers and is a source of strength, unification, and expression.
We shall